screen. That means it's on in that screen.
Good evening. It's 6 o'clock, so if we can take our places, we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to call this meeting of the Manitou Springs City Council to order. This is a regular meeting for July the 20th, 2021. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll all join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Would the city clerk please call the roll?
Yes. Councilors Judith Chandler,
Present.
John Shada, Julie Wolf,
Here.
Natalie Johnson,
Here.
Steve Brimner,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Nancy Fortune,
Present.
and Mayor John Graham.
Present. Thank you. Before I ask for approval of the agenda, I would like to call to council's attention the fact that we have members of the Pikes Area Council of Governments here tonight. They're here to primarily to discuss item G2, Transportation Improvement, the program presentation. But we are also, later in the meeting, we have as item H6, another PPACG item. This is requesting a resolution to include Calhan in the PPRTA funding stream. And I apologize, I should have thought to put this item 6 as item 1. That way we would be able to take advantage of the PPACG folks, so we'd have one item that they're very knowledgeable in, followed by another where we might want to ask questions of them. So if council could, I would request that council consider approving the agenda with the modification of moving item H6 to H1, and then we'd take the items in the same order, the other items. So if someone can entertain a motion to that.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as written, with the exception of moving item H6 to H1, and the items 1 through, currently shown as items 1 through 5 will be moved to 2 through 6. All right. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next item, public comment on non-agenda items. Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to speak to a non-agenda item tonight? Judy, have you received any interest? It would appear we don't, so we'll push on. The next item is the consent calendar. We have 3 items on the consent calendar tonight. The first, streets paving improvement, 2021 for Chelton Road, Fountain Place, Short Road, and Spur Road. The second item, approval of the July 6, 2021 regular meeting minutes. And third, review and approve construction contract for the Manitou Springs Fire Station driveway and Manitou Springs Police Department parking lot reconstruction. If there are no objections, I'd entertain a motion to accept and approve.
I move we approve the consent calendar with the exception of item F2, which I'd like to pull for correction.
We have a second? Okay. So the consent calendar then would be to approve items 1 and 3, and then immediately after that, we'll take up item F2, approval of them. discussion approval of the July 6th minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. So now we're on to item F2, approval of the July 6th, 2021 regular meeting minutes. Mayor Pro Tem, you were the one who wanted to discuss this, so you have the floor.
Thank you. Yes, it said that the RPP was approved 7-0, but in fact, I had voted against it for reasons that there was not sufficient data in the packet, and I couldn't make a good decision. So it was a 6-1 vote.
So do you want to make a motion then to modify it?
May I have
Sorry.
a friendly amendment?
Well, we don't have a second yet. But, yeah, go ahead, Julie. I'm sorry. Mayor Pro Tem, if you want to make a motion, then we can hear Julie's friendly amendment.
Sure. Actually, I think Julie has another correction she'd like to make, so I'll defer to Julie to do that.
Okay. Counselor Wolf?
Thank you. I noticed that in council correspondence, there was no mention of the concern about the cog train noise at night. And so that was missing from the minutes. So I would ask that that be added back to the minutes or included in the minutes, as well as modifying the 6-1 RPP vote that Nancy mentioned. Motion, yeah, that's a motion. I so move.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been motion, a second, two modifications, correcting the vote and then also adding the discussion of the cog noise. Sorry, Denise?
I wasn't here for that. I was just wondering, was the cog noise brought up on that date along with last week? Because this was the July 6th minutes, not last week's minutes.
Well,
I think-
last week was a work session, right?
Right.
So that could be, I don't have an exact time frame in my mind of which date that came up. So I may be, that was last week. Oh, okay. Then I withdraw my motion. And let's
So
go with
I will
Nancy's
move
motion.
to correct the RPP vote from 7-0 to 6-1 with me against it for reasons that there was not sufficient data in the packet.
I'll second.
Okay, motion, a second. Any further discussion? If not, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Item G1, presentation. This is a proclamation of exceptionalism in Manitou Springs. And I'll go ahead and read that. Before I do, I'd like to just give a little bit of quick history here. When the Manitou Springs football team won the state championships, several people suggested that the city do something that would be meaningful. Well, the firemen took the ball along with some other people, and they had a parade, which it's pretty hard to beat a parade. Anyway, I still got some comments saying, can the city do something to recognize the football team? And I decided that really wouldn't be fair, because just to recognize the football team, because we'd had a number of things that had happened this year. The fire department, for instance, got Agency of the Year. One of their EMTs got the Medical Systems Educator of the Year. And so you're faced with a situation where if you thank one person, you're going to miss people that you should also thank. So this is really kind of an umbrella proclamation. So with that history behind us, let me go ahead and read it. Proclamation of Exceptionalism in Manitou Springs, July 20, 2021. Whereas the city of Manitou Springs was recognized by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and the Colorado Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for its integrated long-term planning efforts, and whereas the Manitou Springs Fire Department was awarded Agency of the Year by the Plains to Peaks Emergency Medical System and Trauma Region, and whereas paramedic Ashley Wardell was awarded Emergency Medical System Educator of the Year by the Plains to Peaks Emergency Medical System and Trauma Region, and whereas Manitou Springs was recognized as the third friendliest town in the United States by Expedia.com, and whereas the Manitou Springs Creative District was recognized as one of the top 10 best small-town art scenes in America, and whereas Manitou Springs was named one of the 15 best small towns to visit in 2021 by the Smithsonian Magazine, and whereas the Manitou Springs School District's high school football team became the AA state champions, and whereas Manitou Springs on the whole has excelled and successfully managed through the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas the City of Manitou Springs, the Manitou Springs Chamber of Commerce, Manitou Springs School District, Manitou Springs Creative District, and all the Manitou Springs groups, boards, entities, and individuals excel daily in their community-oriented efforts. Now therefore, we, the City Council of the City of Manitou Springs, do hereby recognize the efforts of all aforementioned entities, groups, and individuals, and extend our gratitude for the exceptionalism displayed thus far in 2021. Adopted this 20th day of July 21st. Thank you. So not a bad showing for the year of the pandemic when we thought we were all going to be huddled down. Okay. Item G2. This is the presentation by PPACG, Transportation Improvement Program presentation from the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. And tonight we'll start off with Mr. Andy Gunning. Andy?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Really appreciate the opportunity to give you a brief overview of PPACG. I'm going to talk a little bit broadly about PPACG before we get into the details on the tip, just doing a bit of a check-in here as well. Before I get started, congratulations. Manitou Springs is on a roll by listening to the long list of accomplishments and awards. So really, really good stuff.
Andy, can I ask you to bring the mic a little closer so
Oh, sure.
people at home can hear you? Otherwise, they have problems hearing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure. But thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity. I know we left copies of the slides, hard copy, in front of everybody, and I'm not going to go into these in great detail. This is a good maybe leave behind that you can go through and leaf through at your leisure. I'm just going to flip through these relatively quickly just to kind of give you a snapshot as far as who we are at PPACG, what we do, what some of our key priorities are that we're working on for this year. And as I get closer to the transportation slides, my transportation director, John Leosados, is going to come up and join us, and then segue into the tip discussion to talk about how money flows to PPACG and then out to our local jurisdictions for transportation projects. So I'll take a few minutes just to give you a bit of a refresher for those that have been around for a little bit, but maybe a little bit of a tutorial, if you will, for those that haven't been exposed to what we do at the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. So just to kind of get started, we're one of 15 or 16 councils of government throughout the state of Colorado, or COGS. And we're basically regional planning organizations that are set up to deal with issues that cross jurisdictional boundaries. For us, that means we serve our 16-member jurisdictions. Manitou Springs has a seat at our table, but really set up to deal with issues, and I'll go through those here in just a moment, that really do cross our boundaries. So we're looking at issues from a regional standpoint. This next slide shows the 13 cities and towns that are in the 3 counties that we serve as far as our geographic footprint. We cover El Paso, Park, and Teller counties. Our governing board is made up of elected officials from each one of those jurisdictions. So it's a 20-member board. Mayor Graham represents the city of Manitou Springs. Our current chair is El Paso County Commissioner Stan Vanderwerf. I did invite him to come here tonight, but don't believe he was gonna make it after all. But elected officials from our local jurisdictions basically make up our governing body. We also, before we jump on, just wanted to mention, we also work with a bunch of other stakeholders at the state level and the federal level as well within the work that we do as a COG. And I'll explain that a little bit more, but with close working relationships with folks like CDOT, the State Transportation Department, CDPHE, the Public Health and Environment Department for the state, Health and Human Services at the state, and federal agencies as well, because part of our mission, our mandate starts at the federal level with some of the programs that we work on. Okay, next slide. Just real briefly, not going to dive into this in detail, but we identified some of our goals from our strategic plan here. Our first ever strategic plan was adopted in 2018. We came into formation in 1967, I think, so we were around for 50 years until we actually put pen to paper to come up with a strategic plan. But this really guides and drives everything that we work on as an organization. Some of the key themes that came out of our plan that really underlie everything we do is we serve as a regional convener with our jurisdictions, for issues that cross jurisdictional boundaries, obviously, within our mission, but then other issues as well. We can be a convener on a whole variety of different topics that come up in the community. Information sharing became a really big theme as well. So that kind of drives a lot of the work that we do on a continuous basis. Next slide. We have 6 major program areas, and I'm just going to touch real briefly on each one of them and let you know what some of the highlights are that we're working on. One thing I should mention as well, I mentioned our governing board made up of elected officials. We have a lot of committees as well that really drive a lot of the work that we do. And Karen sits on our Transportation Technical Advisory Committee along with Dole. We've got a bunch of committees. We have a Community Advisory Committee. Everything that goes to our board for a decision first has to go through our CAC, if you will, for a recommendation before it goes to the board. So a lot of buy-in, a lot of collaboration in our decision-making process, and it really does strengthen how we do our planning work. Next slide, just going to touch on the legislative item real quick. We've got a legislative committee, which is basically a subcommittee of our governing board that meets every Monday during our state legislative session. We kind of ran them into overtime this past session. On the left-hand side, you'll just see the themes that we adopted for this year that really drive what our legislative concerns were, if you will, or what our legislative priorities were. Then on the right side are some of the items that we worked on as a group with our legislative committee and then with the full board. But we've really spent some deliberate time to build up our capacity as far as legislative work, especially at the state level. We're sharpening our focus on some federal issues as well, which we haven't been as active at that level in the past, but given that there's so much activity at the federal level that impacts what we do as far as funding and program direction, felt like we really need to start focusing on federal issues as well. So you'll hear more about that in the coming months and years from us, I'm sure. Next slide. We wear a lot of different hats, and one of them is, in addition to being a council of governments, we also serve as what's called the Area Agency on Aging, or the AAA. And basically, that's a part of our organization that's set up to deal with senior issues that our senior community deals with across our entire region. Congress passed, I think it was in 1967, the Older Americans Act, that authorized programs and funding to help our seniors across the United States to be able to coordinate those activities and distribute those funds. There needs to be a AAA that acts as that body that decides where those funding needs should go. So our board just adopted, I think it was back in June, our contracts for this current state fiscal year for our senior needs across the region. Next slide. Just on the left-hand side identifies some of the internal programs that we run for our seniors. We keep a portion of the money within PPACG to provide some direct services, and then we contract out with about usually 18 to 20 service agencies in the region to provide major funding for their operations as well. So just real briefly, on the left-hand side, some of the services that we provide. We do a lot of work around Medicare Consulting with our seniors. Trying to navigate the Medicare process is pretty cumbersome. We have a series of caseworkers that are experts in that field. We run what's called a Family Caregiver Support Center. A lot of us are dealing with issues with aging parents, or you're an informal care provider for a senior family member or a friend or a neighbor, but you're not trained, you're not equipped to provide that kind of service. We have a small group that provides advice and counseling for those that are providing senior services to family members and others. We run an ombudsman program dealing with seniors that live in long-term care facilities as well, try to deal with issues that come up between the facility and residents in long-term care. Not going to get into the issues on the right-hand side, but for the services that we fund for entities like Silver Key and Vita and a whole host of others, they provide a whole host of different services directly for our senior residents throughout the region. It might be transportation to doctor's appointments, to go shopping, whole variety of different things. We also do a ton of classes on issues that I mentioned: Medicare, Social Security, retirement, and a whole host of other issues. So suggest if you want to dive into that deeper, we have a whole bunch of info on our website on different classes. Shifting gears a little bit, we also work in the environmental planning arena, but it's pretty specific to a couple of key areas. It deals with water quality and air quality. If you want to jump ahead, thank you, Jessica. Water quality, I'll just mention that our board adopted a regional water quality management plan last year, something we have to keep updated every several years, that deals primarily with wastewater service providers and how they're managing growth and discharge into our streams and rivers and so forth. So we're the lead planning agency for water quality issues in that realm. The main thing I want to mention here is that on the air quality side, we're the lead air quality planning agency for our region. And what that means is that we have to make sure that we're complying with the 6 major pollutants of regulatory concern that are set by EPA. We're meeting all of the standards that EPA sets for air quality at the moment, but the one that we're really on the cusp of and always dealing with is a challenge is with ozone. You probably see regular reports about the Denver region and further up in the North Front Range. They're in what's called non-attainment for the ozone standard set by EPA. And they're about to get downgraded, perhaps from serious to severe non-attainment. We still meet the standard here, and we're doing everything we can to stay within the threshold that EPA has set. We actually signed up for a voluntary program called the Ozone Advanced Program, run by EPA, where it's designed for communities like us that are growing rapidly below the standard, still maintaining the standard, but have concerns about us encroaching on it at some point. So this helps us with technical support, outreach, and community support to help kind of keep our numbers where they need to be. The one wild card in all of this is wildfire activity. So far, knock on wood, it hasn't been horrible this summer, although obviously, and I got a notice earlier today, you can see wildfire smoke today. So that's one issue that we don't have a whole lot of control over, that if we end up having a really bad wildfire season this year and next year potentially as well, then I've got some concerns that we could end up in non-attainment for ozone. So something that we're tracking really, really closely. So moving on from there, just I'll mention just briefly, we run a military planning program to provide support and make sure we're making good decisions around our 5 military installations we have in the region. They're major economic drivers that we have. I've read that they comprise up to 40% of our regional economy between the installations and the spin-off industries that support our installations. So we want to make sure that we're good neighbors as well in our communities and making sure that we're not making bad land use decisions, making sure we're managing environmental and infrastructure needs and so forth. So we have a pretty active program in that regard. And I'll mention that we just got a grant from the Department of Defense to run this program for another 2 years. We just got it last month. And 2 main focus areas for the next 2 years are going to be on wildfire mitigation and management. So we'll probably coordinate on that with Manitou for sure, because that is one issue that cuts across the entire region. But wildfire management and also flood control issues, especially as they impact the Air Force Academy. Next slide. The only thing I'm going to mention here, and I know you're going to talk about the Pprta and the possibility of the town of Callahan joining in a moment. Just want to mention that we, through PPACG, also provide support and through a contractual agreement between PPACG and Pprta to basically run the RTA, if you will. We provide support to the board of the RTA. And I would just mention that I know we're going to talk about TIP funding, transportation funding on the PPACG side here in just a moment. We get about $10 million a year through our TIP that is basically federal money. It's authorized by Congress, it flows through the state and then to the region, then we divvy that up with our governing board. So that's about $10 million a year. On the Pprta, and that's really, really important. That means a lot that we put that to really, really good use. On the Pprta side, we're generating close to $120 million a year through the sales tax that we have in place with our 5 member jurisdictions. So just thinking about all the good work that we've done over the past 15 years since the RTA started in 2004, 2005, for me, I can't imagine where we'd be had we not had the foresight to set up the RTA in the first place. If you take that out of the equation, given our regional travel needs, we would just be in really dire straits, I think, had we not thought about putting this in place in the first place. So Manitou is obviously one of the charter members, one of the first 4 jurisdictions that joined in 04, 05, but really meaningful program. Next slide. And actually, if you want to jump ahead one more, Jessica. And if John wants to maybe start making his way up here as well, I'll pass the torch so he can dive into the TIP in a little more detail here. Just wanted to mention a couple of things real quick before I hand it off. One of the things we're working on in our transportation planning realm is a couple of rulemaking efforts that are happening at the state. 2 of them in particular, although one just sort of shifted direction yesterday, and the other one hasn't been formally filed yet, but the 2 deal with reducing travel by employees at major employers at different sites, North Front Range, but potentially in our region as well, but a major employer being a site that employs 100 employees or more. There was a state Air Quality Control Commission rulemaking initiation hearing back in May to get the process started to set some new rules to reduce travel for those employer sites. And initially, they were going to set some targets to reduce basically drive-alone commutes to work. Our region wasn't initially going to be part of that rulemaking process, but there were comments by the Air Quality Control Commission that we might get swept into it. For now, we think it's going to go in the direction of being a voluntary program and not a mandatory program, which I think is the right approach. But we're going to keep tracking that. I know there's going to be another hearing with the Air Quality Control Commission in August around that, but we're tracking that really, really closely. You know, when I say we, I mean John and Jessica. The second rulemaking that's going to get started deals with transportation as well, and that's where the state may set, through a CDOT process and the State Transportation Commission, they may set targets where we've got to reduce travel throughout the region, regardless of whether it's work trips or shopping trips, but we have to forecast what our travel is going to be by a certain year and then reduce that by a certain amount. And we don't know what those amounts are yet, but it's going through a process with CDOT right now where they're trying to identify what those target reductions would need to be for each region. So we're tracking that really, really closely. And one thing I'll mention is that regardless of where you stand on climate change and issues around should we reduce emissions, you know, we all would agree, I think, that we ought to reduce travel if we can, and we should provide better transportation options for our residents to get around town, and not just by car, but better transit access and all modes of transportation. We'd love to reduce peak hour congestion, and we want to reduce emissions as well. Just that we've got concerns, and I know our board has expressed concerns about the way the state might be going about it with a little bit of a heavy-handed approach, so that's where we have some real concerns about it. But I think, you know, some of the goals that have been identified in the roadmap, reducing emissions and providing better options, there's no question. I think we would all basically agree with those basic tenets. Last thing I'll mention before I hand it to John is we're also starting a traffic safety program, or not starting it, but taking over a traffic safety program called Drive Smart Colorado. Despite the pandemic last year and travel being way down, we saw that the rate of really bad crashes, fatal and serious crashes, were actually up last year. So we're really, really concerned about that trend and the trend of people texting while they're driving and running through red lights and so forth. So when we heard that this program, Drive Smart, which had been around for about 30 years in our community, was going to close their shop basically last year, we said, hold on, let's see if our board would be interested in taking this over and basically have it operate within our umbrella at PPACG. And our board supported that. The Drive Smart board is in support of that as well. So we're going to get much more active in traffic safety and traffic education here in the coming years as well. Sooner, but it's going to be a long-term program that we also support. With that, should we shift and talk about the tip?
John, if you could give us your full name and your title, please.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is John Leosatos. My name is John Leosatos. I am the Transportation Director for the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. I've been asked to sort of give you a brief overview, and usually I say brief, but then like 20 minutes later, people are hitting me over the head. But no, I'm really going to try to be brief on the transportation improvement process, because again, I believe you have an item that Karen's going to bring to you shortly. What I've put together here for you is one of my sort of conspiracy theorist sketches with a lot of boxes and arrows. But through the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, we basically see three different types of funding. If you see sort of looking to the left, we receive Federal Transit Administration dollars into the region. There is State of Colorado dollars, and then Federal Highway. A majority, the reason why I organized it so that the federal stuff is sort of split in the middle with the state. Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, we deal mostly with the road funding. The transit dollars run through either CDOT, through their division of transit and rail, or the direct allocation that comes to the Pikes Peak region goes through Mountain Metro Transit as the designated recipient for FTA funds. So we've got transit funds, we've got then the state funds, which for our particular purpose again, not wanting to dive into the weeds and stay closer to the 5 minutes than the 20 minutes, is that the reason why you care is that the state funds for roadway purposes go on state routes like 21, 24, and I-25. And then sort of, then you see on the bottom, then we've got the federal transportation dollars from the Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA. Those come in the form of STP dollars, or Surface Transportation Program, and transportation alternatives. And again, so now from this point on, I'm going to stay towards the bottom of the screen. We can hop up to the top of the screen later on if you've got questions, but I'm going to really try to keep to that 5 minutes. Those federal funds, when we receive notice of how much we have available, if you notice the next box over, we've got the MPO there. So we put out a notice, so we let Dole and Karen know how much funding is available to the region. They make application for those dollars. Those applications then come back to the region to prioritize. And if you notice, I've got a little box there that says LRTP. We love our acronyms in transportation. That's for the Long-Range Transportation Plan. So for you to be eligible, for a project to be eligible for the for TIP funding, it's got to be consistent with the Long-Range Transportation Plan. So you can't just sort of come up with an idea and run in and say, we want to get this funded. You sort of have to plan for it, so make sure it's in the Long-Range Transportation Plan. That being said, it's just paper. It doesn't hurt anybody. So we amend the plan if necessary, because we're not going to be overly bureaucratic and miss out on opportunities, because if something's not in a plan, it's just a plan. We redo the plan and we get the project in there. So as a matter of fact, right now we are going through a long-range plan amendment so that there's 10 projects in it now, but the reason the amendment was called for was the city of Colorado Springs was looking for the federal funding for the Peterson Northgate. So instead of us saying, hey, well, you're not in the plan, you have to wait 4 years, we just go ahead and amend the plan. And again, there are some other projects in there from the region. Also, it has to be functionally classified. The feds have a system by which they classified roadways because, again, they'd like to see their federal dollars used on the network that has the most connectivity that people are using. So in other words, you're not going to see federal dollars being used to fix the potholes on your neighborhood street or to take care of a little drainage issue inside a neighborhood. These are federal dollars, and so they usually are for a collector and above, collector, arterial, that sort of thing. So once back to that MPO box, that prioritization, we make sure that it's federally eligible because it's in the long-range plan, it's functionally classified, and it meets one of the eligibility requirements for the federal funds. After we go through a process by which we look at our performance criteria and we score the projects, the Transportation Advisory Committee provides a recommendation that goes through our committee process. And again, we are not beholden to that scoring criteria. We have the ability to use our professional judgment to make sure that the best projects get recommended for funding to the board of directors. And I would also say that there is a fair bit of jurisdictional equity. We make sure that the big guys don't run away with all of the cheese. We like to spread it around and make sure that all of the other jurisdictions usually get some project in some form. That goes through that committee process. Once the board of directors approves it, you notice I've got PPACG board on the screen there. Then it becomes programmed into the TIP. Once a project is into the TIP, it is considered to be have funding available from the region to move forward once it is in the first year of the TIP. And so that, in a very small nutshell, is how the TIP process works. I could have gone on for much longer, but I think I've sort of hit what Karen needed me to hit before you hear that agenda item. That being said, I'm happy to answer any questions about anything transportation related. I'm a little weak on geography, so,
Okay. Thank you, John. The opening question has to do with medieval history, so no, thanks. That was helpful. Council, do you have questions for John? I guess it was pretty complete and lucid there, John. It's, you'll have to bear with us. It's a lot for us to try and assimilate in one sitting, but we do appreciate that. And I would like to mention that, as John just said, making sure that the smaller players in this organization, that we get a reasonable share. Back in the January, February timeframe, John was the architect of a funding situation. The State Highway wanted to put a large amount of CARES money into the Powers interchange in the northern part of the county. Anyway, thanks to his efforts, we and a lot of the other small towns got something like $200,000, which was very helpful for us, so we do appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you very much. Again, I would love to take credit for it, but it really is, again, a regional effort. All the jurisdictions stepped forward. All I did is read the whole thing through so I could find the best strategy for it.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay. If there are no questions, very good. Right, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming out and walking us through all this. This is great. Okay. The next item, H1, formerly known as H6, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. Oh, I'm sorry, my apologies, Karen.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I'm Karen Birchtold. I'm a senior planner with the city's planning department. And that was a really great overview of both PPACG and the TIP process. So the city administrator asked me to just provide a brief update on staff's deliberations on possible TIP projects. And so I'm kind of filling in for Dole Grabenik. Dole is our member representative to the PPACG Technical Advisory Committee, as Andy noted. This is the board of staff representatives, mostly engineers, that get together and provide the staff and professional perspective on projects in planning for the region. And I serve as the alternate. And so I think it's good to have two people doing this. There are monthly meetings, and there's a lot of material covered, so it's good to have the two perspectives and for us to fill in on for each other. And also Jeff Jones is here too in Dole's absence. So this is just another perspective of some of the steps that Andy and John covered. As they noted, we start with a long-range transportation plan. That's a 20-year plan. And then the next process is we have what we call the TIP process. And that's when PPACG releases a call for projects, and they have a specific amount of money that can be programmed into projects. So this is where the funding is assigned. And the funding's assigned by year, and so that ends up in a specific project, the yellow box, project delivery, which is basically design and construction, the engineering intensive side of the project. And so an example currently would be the MAPS project is a project that's under construction. And the Creek Walk Trail Phases 4 and 5 is a project that's under design. Oops. And so we did have a recent call for projects. It's specific by year, so this is 2025 to 2027. And again, this is fiscally constrained. There's a pot of money that is allocated. And the group that Dole and I belong to will review this list of projects and apply some criteria, equity factors, and recommend a slate of projects. And then it will be approved by the board of directors. And so this is a map of possible projects that we could consider for the TIP amendment. And we did recently have a call for projects to update the long-range transportation plan, as Andy noted. And that was a good opportunity for us to add projects to that plan. And we considered all of these for possible TIP projects. And so there's Creek Walk Trail, phases 6 to 8, Ruxton Ave, which actually is already in the transportation plan, East Manitou Ave pedestrian and drainage improvements, El Paso Boulevard, and Lovers Lane and Creek Walk. Also, the Crystal Park Road project is in the long-range plan. That was really never moved forward to a formal project. And so as part of the application, PPACG staff asked us to consider PPACG goals and then also federal performance standards. And so we kind of thought through some of the strengths of these various projects as we went through them and thought about how they might compete in an application process. And these are some criteria that we kind of brainstormed as we considered some different aspects of projects we wanted to support. And so we're working with federal funding, and as Andy mentioned, Andy and John, sometimes some other funding sources come up as well. And we usually have to provide some type of match. And for these two federal programs, the match for roadway projects is 17.21%. And there's a program called Transportation Alternatives, bike, ped, transit projects. The match is 20%. So we had to provide a funding commitment letter to note that we would follow through on that part of the project. And so these are the projects that we decided to submit. Ruxton, we submitted a request for additional construction funding. And so El Paso roadway, really looking at safety enhancements for that roadway. Lovers Lane Creek Walk, we would integrate the Creek Walk Trail in that project. Has key safety and also mobility. Needs mobility improvements. East Manitou Ave, we saw really as an economic vitality project. And then Creek Walk Trail, of course, is our ongoing project to extend the Creek Walk from east to west. And so that has both, I would say primarily connectivity and accessibility advantages. And so we submitted all these projects in this priority. We were asked to prioritize them as well. So we will look forward to seeing where this process goes. We also had to provide cost estimates for all these projects, so including design and construction costs. So we will report to you how the process goes, how our projects fare in this discussion, starting with the Technical Advisory Committee and then ending up with the Board of Directors. So I think these will become official, I think, in 2022. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Counselor Wolf, please, and then Mr. Bremner.
Can you explain how the East Manitou Ave project overlaps with the URA efforts? I don't understand.
It doesn't, actually. So the project boundaries for that would be about from City Hall to the URA. So that's kind of an area where we haven't implemented streetscape improvements. So it would kind of fill that gap.
Mr. Bremner?
Yeah, I just had a question on the Ruxton bike pedestrian. You know, Ruxton Avenue is only got so much real estate. It's pretty narrow. And I imagine that project would call for some type of design. I'm all in favor of having bike pedestrians. In fact, I'd like to have only bike pedestrians and very limited cars if possible. But I'm just wondering, is that possible plan for design, or is that for actual implementation? And if so, do you have an idea of what it would look like?
That project is design and construction, and I think that they're just initiating the design process. Is that right, Jeff? Do you have, okay. So I can't answer specifically about the bike and ped piece.
Can you hear me? So right now, it's just in design with JR Engineering, and the bike and ped part of it is looking to the future of possibly alternate routes of going up Ruxton, possibly having a way out, maybe a loop around. We're making it one way. That's just one thought. And that way, if you did that, you would have room to put bike and ped traveling through there. That's just a thought. Nothing is, but we're having them try to design that and to see where we go with that. So,
Thank you, Jeff.
yes, sir.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thanks. So I'm a little confused on this, if it's for design now, because my understanding is this is for the 2022 long-range plan for earliest funding in '25, I thought. Am I correct in that?
The 2025 funding would be for construction. And it's to supplement funding that we
Okay.
are already tapping into for the design.
Okay, so you've already
Yeah.
got design dollars.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That helps.
I think Natalie, I think you're next, and then Judith.
Can the prioritization change if something emerges? Like I'm thinking of like Lover's Lane, you know, if another couple chunks of the creek fall in or the bridge fall in the creek, something like that. Can we move things around, or are those kind of set in stone?
Well, this was the priority that we submitted. So, I mean, Lover's Lane would be I guess, the second priority. Yeah, we can't change this submittal. Yeah.
Judith?
Jeff, could you expand a little bit on the possible TAP funding for El Paso? What are the thoughts on that? I'm really concerned about safety in that particular area, so.
Sure, absolutely. So right now, what I'm doing in coordination with Roy, in direction with Denise, is trying to do some traffic calming on El Paso by narrowing the lanes down to 9 foot. And by doing that, it'll give a more of a bike and ped access to one side. So I'm working with our street striping company that we have, and we're doing a lot of planning right now on doing that. In the future, we're looking to get funds through the TAP process through CDOT to possibly fund that, to where we may be able to widen certain spots. We all know that certain spots in El Paso, it's almost impossible, and certain spots are wider. So we're trying to make it more friendly, obviously, to pedestrians and bikes through there, and try to keep that a conduit of travel for folks who are riding bikes and want to run and whatever the case might be. So it's a work in progress.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
One other question. I was wondering if it might be appropriate in the future to have this prioritization list come to council for comment before it goes into the, I mean, I know that this year, yeah, the deadline was January 25th, but it just
I think
seems
that
a
would
little-
probably be a good idea.
Okay, good, we agree, Jeff, thank you.
Denise?
I'll just make a comment. In the past, the city didn't even bring this to council, and so when it got done, it had to go quick. And, yeah, we've talked about that this needs to come to council to get your perspective before we submit. So it is one of those things that it's a process improvement, so thank you.
Good point, thank you. Other comments or questions from council? I guess not, okay, great. Jeff, before you take your seat, I'm asking a favor of you. We have some chocolate to pass out, so if you would pass it out, that'd be good.
Sure.
Thank you.
Actually, this is kind of cause to celebrate. I think this is the largest audience we've had since we've been meeting in person, so thank you. Well, our next item is the one we moved up, and that's the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments requesting approval of a resolution to include Calhan in the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority funding stream. And actually, Jeff was going to present that, I believe, so here I've got him passing out chocolate.
I think
Okay,
Andy's going to go
I
ahead.
think, okay, great. Well, this is super. Andy, if you'll,
I'll get it started, then
Okay.
Jeff can jump in. As you may know, the PPRTA is in basically round two. We call it PPRTA 2, which is in effect until the end of 2024. The capital portion of the PPRTA basically expires at a 10-year mark, and that's December 31st, 2024. And maybe I'll back up a little bit. The PPRTA revenue, it's generated by 1 cent sales tax. It's split up 55, 35, 10. 55% of the money goes to capital projects, basically roadway improvement projects. 35% of the money goes to maintenance on road projects throughout your jurisdiction, and then 10% goes to transit service for regional transit operations, primarily by MMT. So it's 55, 35, 10. The 35 and the 10 portion don't expire per the initial approval of the voters, but the 55% does after every 10 years. There's a sunset in place. So this one will expire at the end of 2024. What the PPRTA board has discussed is going out for an extension of another 10-year period in November of 2022. So we're working under that guidance. We've had discussions with the PPRTA board starting last year to find out, as we go out for an extension, is there interest in expanding a wider net and having additional jurisdictions join the PPRTA beyond the 5 that are currently part of it: City of Colorado Springs, City of Manitou Springs, Green Mountain Falls, the town of Rama, and El Paso County. And the board said, yes, we'd like to reach out to the other jurisdictions within our county, but also within our MPO regions. That means Calhan, Palmer Lake, Monument, Fountain, and then Woodland Park. Even though Woodland Park is primarily in Teller County, they're in our regional transportation planning area that John described earlier. So we've reached out to the other jurisdictions, Woodland Park and Fountain, said no thank you, but the others, we're still having conversations with Palmer Lake and Monument to see if they potentially might be interested. Callahan has definitely expressed interest, and they've adopted a resolution by their town council expressing that they'd like to move forward with basically what we're calling a joining election that they would hold potentially this November or in April of 2022 to join, but that's contingent on the PPRTA board saying, okay, we're going to formally extend the invitation to let you in. So before Callahan begins to spend money to get on the ballot in November or April of next year, there needs to be a formal agreement, and basically that's in the form of the resolution that you have in your packet tonight. So it's basically all the jurisdictions, the 5 jurisdictions that currently comprise the PPRTA are passing a similar resolution saying that, yes, we'd like to extend the invitation and have Callahan potentially join the PPRTA. Has to first pass in Callahan. If it passes in Callahan, then they would be part of our regional election in November of 2022.
No, exactly what you just said, and plus it has to be unanimous vote for all the parties that are in it right now. So my understanding from Mr. Sonnenberg is that they're thinking to approve it, but that shouldn't sway anybody's concerns, or if you have questions, he said to give it to us, give it to me, and I'll bring it back to them to answer for you.
I might add that there's one aspect of this is that currently and correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but there's 9 directors, 3 of whom are El Paso County Commissioners, 3 are Colorado Springs City Council members, and then we have 1 each from the other jurisdictions, Rama, Manitou, and Green Mountain Falls. So you have 9 people voting. There is some concern going into the future if more small jurisdictions are added into this. Will we have a situation where the small jurisdictions collectively have leverage over the county and the city of Colorado Springs? So be forewarned that we're trying to figure out an equitable way to do the voting. So that's a slight wrinkle that this proposal has raised. It's kind of a separate issue that's being looked into. But I know, Andy, if you want to speak to that at all, or if it's premature.
That's a great point, Mr. Mayor. It actually came up in conversation with the PPRTA board, I think it was at last week's meeting, where in August we're going to bring back some ideas around what that might look like potentially. One of the options is could there be weighted voting by the member jurisdictions? The city has really expressed interest in making sure that there is some proportional representation from the city and the county, but they're more concerned obviously about the city's interest, but the county I think is going to have the same interest. So we're doing some research and working with the PPRTA attorney to see what weighted voting might look like in that kind of scenario. We'll have a conversation around that in August. And that seems like it's a fair consideration to at least bring to the table.
Great, thank you. Council, do you have questions or comments for Andy or Jeff? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Yeah, looking at populations, it was, when Rama has less than 200 people and Callahan has, 800 or something. So what's interesting, though, is you'd have 2 small jurisdictions on one end of 24 and 2 relatively small but still much bigger than on the other end of 24. So could you, but I was concerned when I looked in like less than 1,000 people would be represented with 2 votes, which is pretty substantial. So could you give us other pros and cons of, are there other pros and cons for inviting Callahan onto the board?
I think it's a fair question. And I think the biggest kind of overarching pro is that as we plan transportation, it's a regional asset. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a household that lives in their jurisdiction and they shop and they go to work and recreate in their own jurisdiction. It's a regional dynamic, transportation is. So setting up a regional transportation authority that has additional jurisdictions, that's, I think, fundamentally a really good model to have in place. And I'll mention, I may have alluded to this earlier, that Monument is having conversations. I know that Councilmember Wayne Williams from the city of Colorado Springs went to the Monument Town Council meeting last night and had a fairly positive conversation, but no promises in either direction. So there's interest by Monument and potentially by Palmer Lake as well. We've had conversations there. So I think more jurisdictions that are part of our urban region, if you will, gives us a much better chance to really figure out how people are connected and how they need to get around, whether it's by roadway or by transit. And that's fundamentally a positive thing a positive way to approach transportation and for transportation planning and funding. You know, on the negative, on the drawback side, it gets into details that I don't have in front of me today, but you know, the money's generated by where sales tax is generated, by brick and mortar stores, but also online sales and car sales, and then it's redistributed based on population. So some jurisdictions maybe have more retail than a population base, so they're going to be generators and maybe not get as much money back. Others are going to have the opposite effect, where they generate more revenue than their population would then receive back as a jurisdiction. So those that are looking at it, you know, from a purely, and I don't mean this negatively, but from a parochial standpoint, to see what's in it for them, they're going to do that calculus and see, well, we're going to leak a little bit of sales tax revenue, and maybe that's not a good thing for us, might be their initial reaction. But, I mean, my argument might be that, well, there are other residents that are maybe shopping in your jurisdiction from unincorporated El Paso County or from another jurisdiction. They're coming into your jurisdiction to shop as well. So that gets back to kind of the regional connectivity issue and how we're all kind of tied in together. So I don't know if that helps or not, but those are some of the big picture issues.
No, I think that's great, and I would certainly be supportive of this request, but I would be interested in hearing the analysis of the weighted voting, so.
Councilor Wolf?
So it seems a little odd that we're being asked to make a decision without knowing how it will impact voting. Am I missing something? So those two are connected.
Yeah, they are. I mean, so the immediate question on the table is, you know, will Manitou support a resolution welcoming Calhan into the PPRTA? And all the existing member jurisdictions would have to do that. We'd have to have a unanimous vote of those jurisdictions. And then the question beyond that is, how would the voting be done on the various items that board oversees, you know, going forward? So, and
Well,
right
my
now
comment is that it seems odd that we're asked to decide yes or no on Calhan. For example, if Calhan were to get 7 votes, I mean, you know, just theoretically, I'd probably vote against it because it wouldn't make sense to me. So it just seems odd that we're being asked to vote on something without knowing the impact of that decision on the voting structure. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true, and it seems like we spent in fact, we did spend a fair amount of time last week at the PPRTA meeting, and we didn't have any tight resolution. We gave it to our attorney and asked her to research it, you know, to look into the possibility of weighted voting. That seemed to be the most acceptable, equitable arrangement, but at the same time, you know, the statement was made, if you've got a better idea, you know, speak up or, you know, send us an email or something. So, you know, we're looking at an equitable way to handle this.
Do we have the option of postponing this vote until we find out how it will impact the voting structure on the board?
I believe they're asking to have a resolution in by the end of August. Andy, can you clarify that?
The hope was that all the jurisdictions could take action before August, ideally. And I understand the fact that you may feel a little bit boxed in by that, and I appreciate that concern. It's been a little bit of a timing challenge as well, just making sure that we give Callahan enough time to coordinate with the clerk's office to put together the information that would have to go on the ballot if they're going to aim for the November date as well. So I appreciate the awkwardness with the timing. I mean, waiting a week or two isn't going to make maybe as much of a difference because the conversation with the board, PPRTA board, is not going to happen until the August meeting, which I think is August 11th. So I'm searching for a way, a path forward that might still seem reasonable. Because believe me, I know that, Callahan, I haven't talked with them directly, but, they're aware that this conversation's happening too, and they don't know exactly what it's going to look like with them moving forward. So there's a little bit of a leap of faith, admittedly, with the new jurisdiction and also with the existing jurisdictions. City of Colorado Springs passed a resolution last week, and their resolution basically said that they support Callahan joining, but they also want to make sure they have adequate representation. I don't have a definition of what adequate representation is yet. It's a little bit squishy, obviously. So I appreciate the challenges around the timing, but also trying to give Callahan enough lead notice here to let them decide if they do indeed want to be on the ballot in November.
Sure, yeah,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
So does that mean that Callahan is going to decide if they want to join without even knowing what, if any, votes they'll be awarded on the board?
That's part of the challenge that they're going to have to grapple with between now and November. I mean, the hope is that it's going to be settled not by November, but a lot sooner than that. But they probably have to make a decision if they are going to go in November. I think they have to decide by the end of August if they're going to contract with the clerk's office and pay money to be on the ballot. They've got to make that decision. So the pressure is on our attorney to do some research around what weighted voting is going to look like, and then on the board and at the August meeting to try to sort through what some of those scenarios might look like. I don't know if it's going to be settled by the board in August. So yes, it is a little bit of a leap of faith, and if Callahan needs to be comfortable with what that's going to look like, I guess, or just trust the process is going to work through our existing board.
Does the existing board then vote on the decision made on how to allocate the votes once these additional jurisdictions have joined? Is that up to the board?
That'll come back to all the jurisdictions. 99% sure that would come back to the jurisdictions in the form of another amendment to the IGA that ties all the jurisdictions together in the RTA. So you'll have a chance to vote on that as well. Once it's recommended by the board, by the PPRTA board, it's got to be referred out to each one of the member jurisdictions. It's a kind of a complicated and kind of a high hurdle to make any substantive changes with how we operate, because they have to just not be approved by the board, but by each of the member jurisdictions by a supermajority vote. So it's all going to come back to the city here at some point, once we have something, once the board is comfortable with a recommendation on representation.
It's not a quick or simple path. And if we had a quick and simple answer, we'd already have it, so. Judith?
So I generally have trouble with leaps of faith in situations like this. I just feel like there's the push is to get it, for Callahan to get it on the ballot. So I'm feeling like, sitting here tonight, I feel like there's more questions than answers, and I feel like I'm not ready to make a decision until we have more information, and sounds like the worst case scenario is until we get this additional information, which is fairly important to making this decision, that the worst case scenario, they would have to wait another election cycle. Is that what we're up against as far as timing?
I don't want to speak out of school, but I think what I understand is that they have an option, I believe, in going in April of next year, April 2022, just within the town of Callahan to decide if they want to join or not. Pretty sure that's the case, that they still can go then instead of in November. We haven't really discussed that with the board yet and haven't really thoroughly discussed it with Callahan, I don't believe. And I would suggest, actually, if, not that we're going to have many more answers from our attorneys yet on what the different scenarios might be, and the board is not going to meet until August, but if you do need to delay the vote on this, a week or two until your next meeting, our PPRTA manager, who does know the IGA process, amendment process, and the different implications, frontwards and backwards, much better than I do, could defer this a week or two until Rick Sonnenberg is back and able to attend.
Okay, so that'd be an option.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Just for information, I have, Dan Stewart was one of the architects, I believe, of the PPRTA, so I've reached out to him for some advice on this question, but I've not yet heard back from him. So I would like to get some thoughts from him on this question as well. So I wouldn't mind delaying it until potentially our first meeting in August to relook it with a bit more information.
Well, council, we could defer this then to the August 3rd meeting. That would be, a couple weeks from now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd support that.
Okay, so it sounds like we have support for that. We were asked to approve this. We could make a formal motion, somebody to make a formal motion to postpone to a future date.
Sure, I'll do that. I had something else I wanted to say, but I can't remember now. So I move that we postpone our decision on this until our first meeting in August in an effort to get more information to help us make this decision.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
And I would just also ask that and I don't know who, maybe John, you, but all of our questions that would require, to get more information, what are our questions, what information do we require, and get those to you potentially.
I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, you could just email me or give me your questions, and I'll relay them to Rick Sonnenberg, who's the executive director of the PPRTA. I believe I said that right. He's the kind of go-to guy on that.
Program director.
Program director.
Close enough.
Okay. Okay, it's better to be accurate. Program director. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? I would like to make the comment that for the small jurisdictions like us, PPRTA has really, I think it's been an effective and very helpful organization. I know Dan Stewart did mention to me that the Public Works Director here in Manitou, when we joined it, a year or two afterwards, he said his budget had gone up. It was like threefold. It was increased. So even though it's not, for a small jurisdiction, it's not a huge amount of money by PPRTA standards, for a small community like Calhan, this can be a make or break kind of situation. So I think there's going to be interest not only from Calhan, but we may see other jurisdictions wanting to come in here in the coming years. So I guess better to do it right and get it right, and then rather than get it fast. Okay. All in favor of postponing till the August 3rd meeting, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say motion passes 6-1. Okay, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, council, I was thinking maybe we take a break around 7:30 so we could probably get another item or two taken care of if that's agreeable, or we can take a break now if you want. Everybody okay with 7:30? Okay, push on. Jessica, thank you for coming, and also to John and Andy. Great. Okay, so item H2, appointment of Robin Kovatz as alternate member of the Open Space Advisory Committee. In our council packets, we've had all the required criteria, the letter of application and the letter of endorsement. Do we have Robin here? Robin, would you like to come up and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you'd like to do? And if you'd give us your name and address first, please.
I'm Robin Kovatz. I'm at 34 Washington Avenue in Manitou Springs, and I had heard that the Open Space Committee could use a member, and I thought, well, maybe I could help out with that. So I've been attending most of the meetings since February, and I've lived in Manitou for 20 years and used quite a few of the trails and know of quite a few of them. So I'm very interested in seeing what we can do with open space and trails and maintenance.
Great, thank you. Council, do you have any questions or comments for Robin? Okay. Judith?
I would just like to support Robin's appointment to OSAC. I can attest to the fact that she's been attending meetings and has been really an engaging participant, so I think she'd be a great addition to OSAC.
Great, thank you. Would you like to make that in the form of a motion?
I will, unless anybody else has any comments. I move that we approve Robin Kovats as alternate member to OSAC.
Second.
We have a second, okay. And Steve, I saw your hand raised, so I'll call for discussion. Steve?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you, Robin, for stepping forward to join OSAC, and wish you best luck in your endeavors.
Thank you.
Great. Any further discussion? Okay, if not, let's all vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Now the hard work begins. Next item is consideration of approval of a Parks and Recreation Advisory Board memorial request. And I believe we have Danu here. Danu Fat. Oh, and Mrs. Sin. All right. So if you'd give us your names and addresses, please, to start.
Council, Danu Fat here, 1201 Manitou Avenue, Manitou Springs, and I'm the current chair of Pprta. And tonight I have our applicant. Introduce yourself.
My name is Jan Sin. I live at 11 Villaloma, Manitou Springs. Moved here in 1972.
Thank you. Okay. Who would, Danu, do you want to start off?
Sure. Mrs. Zinn approached Pprta with the request to donate a memorial art sculpture that her husband had begun to sculpt. And unfortunately, he passed away before he could finish it. So Mrs. Zinn found another artist, Maria Batista, who was willing to finish the sculpture for her. And there's some photographs of it now up on the screen. Because this is a memorial art request donation, it follows our memorial policy that we have for trees, benches, and artwork. And so Mrs. Zinn completed the application, and Pprta made a few corrections on the wording of her plaque that she is going to get. And we also have been working with the Manitou Springs Art Council, and they have approved it also. We've met on the proposed location of the sculpture, which will be in the Fields Park Playground. And currently what we're trying to do now, we got a donated architectural drawing for the pedestal, which the sculpture will sit on. And we're looking right now for a piece of marble for the sculpture to be attached to, so that the sculpture and the base can be mounted to the pedestal and removed if it need be for, to minimize any damage to it. So all the expenses for this to happen will be the pedestal and maybe the base that the sculpture will sit on. And we have a line item in our Conservation Trust Fund that'll cover the art in our parks. And so we'll be drawing from that fund for expenses. So right now our Park and Rec Director, Skylar, is getting bids for the pedestal. And I'm looking around for a base for the sculpture to get mounted to.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Sin, do you wish to speak?
Well, Steve and I both walked our dog in Fields Park. Dogs, several different ones. And it's right down the street from our house, and it's a really special place to us. And he would be very honored to have his sculpture completed and put down there.
Okay, thank you. Council, do you have questions? Julie?
I just have a comment. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. It's gorgeous. I just really appreciate it.
Thank you. Judith?
I just wanted to say that I received a phone call from Jan many months ago about this statue, and one of the things that you said on the phone was, I want children to play on it. And I just love the fact that the baby bear was added to the feature, and I agree that it's a beautiful statue, and I'm assuming it's all marble and probably quite heavy and pretty resilient for children to play on and enjoy.
How many pounds did we decide, Daniel? Couple hundred pounds.
Yeah, not any heavier than 300, maybe around 250, maybe 200. But the architect designed it for like a 500-pound kind of thing.
Okay. Other questions or comments, council? Okay, well, we're asked to approve this, so I guess we could entertain a motion. Councilor Wolf?
Where is it? I'm looking. I won't find it?
I can go ahead and make a motion if she wants a second.
Thank you.
Got it.
I move to approve the memorial request to place the Mama Bear sculpture in Fields Park.
Second.
I think we have motion and a second. Any further discussion? No, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I believe Councilor Chandler has a grandson, perhaps a granddaughter who'd like to test that out when it's in place.
She does.
Thank you. That'll be a nice addition. Nice addition to the park. Okay. Well, we have, next item is an ordinance, or is first reading of ordinance 0821, an ordinance amending the annual budget for fiscal year 2021. I suspect that's going to take us a little bit longer, so why don't we go ahead and take a 10-minute break now? Or let's see if we're back at 7:35. That sound about right? Okay, well, it's 7:35. We can go ahead and I think get started again. Okay, so the next item, first reading of ordinance number 0821, an ordinance amending the annual budget for fiscal year 2021. So for this, we have Becca Davis, our finance director. Becca?
Yes, I'm Rebecca Davis, the Finance Director. And tonight I'm bringing before you an amended budget for 2021. The city amends the budget at mid-year in order to maintain control over expenditures related to revenue performance and adjust for expenses that were unanticipated when the budget was originally appropriated. This is because the budget is a plan, and plans have to be adjusted based on actual events as the year progresses. So the main amendments to the budget are really because sales tax came in much better than I anticipated. I forecast in a very conservative manner because I would rather raise things at mid-year than decrease things at mid-year because we were overly ambitious. So the main differences that you're going to see in this budget is that the 2020 sales tax increment that we held on to for the ERA until the end of the year, and then they asked for half of it back. And also we were going to take the other half and put it over into the capital improvements fund for capital improvements. And I had budgeted $755,000 for each of these two items, and they actually came in at $831,664, which is an increase of $76,664. So both of these had to be increased by that amount. And we've gone ahead and given the URA their money right away. The sales tax that's going to go over into capital improvements, we haven't transferred over it yet, but that will happen this year. Also, the sales tax TIF for 2021 has to be increased because sales tax is coming in so much higher than we anticipated. And I've increased that by $385,000. So instead of the URA getting $2,185,000, I've got it forecasted at $2,570,000, which is actually, you know, all things considered, it's a nice thing that our sales tax is coming in so much higher than we anticipated. So, you know, revenues follow through in that we increase the sales tax revenue. And our revenues in total, I've increased from $1,403,216 to $13,132,687. And there is one revenue that I did not call out in my message, and I should have, because it was odd looking. And what it is the transfer from storm drainage to the general fund. And I had to increase it considerably by 90 some odd, I don't have that number right in front of me, because the grant administrator used to be in the storm drainage, and last year we switched her over to general fund, and she is grant funded. And when that happened, then that grant money that was coming in last year should have gone into the general fund, but there was a little disconnect between payroll and et cetera, and that money went into storm drainage. Well, now I'm transferring over because it should have gone into the general fund last year. Audit is over, and so I couldn't go back into 2020 and fix it. That's why I just made it a transfer, which is that odd number you see. Other than that, there's things decreased, things increased. We one thing that we do is when the department heads meet, et cetera, if someone has an expenditure that was going to come in higher than anticipated, we ask around if there's an expense that's going to come in less for them, and then if everybody's in agreement, we decrease that account line, increase the other account line in another department, and it balances it out. So all together, we're actually ending in a much better position than we were originally. Originally, we had the ending general fund, unassigned fund balance for 2021 ending at $1,862,713. But because of the higher sales tax last year, we have a better ending fund balance for last year that carries over with the better sales tax this year, et cetera, et cetera. And we have a ending unassigned fund balance forecasted to be $3,761,086. And this is the amended annual budget. Are there any questions?
We have questions for Rebecca? Mayor Pro Tem?
Not about the budget per se, but just curious, our online sales and revenue has increased quite substantially over the past couple of years, particularly last year, correct?
That is correct.
So I was wondering, is there any ability or benefit to perhaps educating our residents that they might want to make choices when they're shopping?
We can maybe make that some kind of one of our stories from our PIO officer.
Because I know I've talked to individuals and they're like, oh, they didn't know that, and they might have shopped online versus going to a big box store or something, and I know that that takes sales tax away from our neighboring jurisdictions, but it certainly assists us, so thanks.
And also, did you know that the sales tax Crystal Park pays when the individuals that live there?
80829.
Yeah, that sales tax also benefits here.
Okay, Natalie?
Do you know if other communities are experiencing a similar, like small communities like Manitou, are experiencing a similar increase in growth income?
You know, Neil Minch tracks that, and he recently did a presentation for us, but I think we are really, everybody's experiencing the higher tide, but our boat's rising higher.
Neil does a comparison with Salida, Estes Park, I believe Breckenridge, and last year we were down. We were not tracking with them. This year we're higher than most of them in all aspects. So lodging is the one thing that has really jumped this year that has helped.
Do you have other questions or comments? Mr. Shada?
Yes, could you speak to the capital improvement fund assigned East End taxes? That's about $400,000 more than was budgeted?
Oh, because last year, we really cut back on everything we could possibly cut back. And that included those projects. And so the money that was budgeted in 2020 got rolled over into 2021. At the end of the year, I had rolled over some of it, but I wasn't quite sure. They were starting to work on some projects, and I didn't want to put the budget below what expenditures actually are, because that's a very bad thing. So I'd rather have the budgeted amount higher than what actual expenditures are, and then at mid-year roll it over, because it's a lot safer to do it that way. You never want to have your expenditures be higher than your budgeted amounts.
Anyone else? Well, if not, we're asked, this would be the first reading of the ordinance, so I would certainly entertain a motion to pass the ordinance, if there's no further discussion. Mayor Pro Tem?
Sure, I move to approve ordinance 0821, an ordinance amending the annual budget for fiscal year 2021 on first reading and set a public hearing for August 3rd at 6 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Becca. Okay. All righty. Next item, consideration of approval of the audited 2020 financials.
Okay, so
Mayor,
Jim,
can I say something before Becca starts? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Denise.
I just want to recognize Becca for hitting the deadline for this again for the audited financials. She hit it last year, and then this year means it met several late nights or many late nights, but she did hit it, and we're going to have it in on time. So I want to recognize her for that and for her hard work to make this happen.
Good point. Very good point. Thank you.
Thank you. So Jim Hinkle was supposed to be here from Hinkle and Company PC. They're the ones that do the audit for us, but unfortunately he had some scheduling conflicts. So Wade and Justin have come in his place. Now, Justin is really only here to answer questions that might be particular to the audit because Justin was actually the lead on the audit. Wade's one of the higher-ups that comes in to present the audit when it's all over with. But and Justin was really great to work with, and I've met Wade tonight, and he's seems like a really solid guy.
Okay, great. Okay, do you want to bring them forward? Good evening. If you'd start off by giving us your name and title, please.
Good evening. My name is Wade Fisher, and I'm a manager with Hinkle and Company, Certified Public Accountants. And I am still a worker bee. I still audit quite a bit. Oh, that's okay. First and foremost, I also want to acknowledge and say that the accounting department has just done a stellar job in working with us through the whole engagement. It was seamless. She runs a pretty tight ship. I'll just do that in layman's term, rather than get into all the accounting language. And the audit is a clean audit. There are no findings, and that's the best thing that you can get in an audit. And I would just like to read from page 2 of the audit report, if I may, and it is the auditor's opinion. And it simply reads, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate discretely presented component unit and remaining fund information of the City of Manitou Springs as of December 31, 2020, and the respective changes in financial position and the cash flows, where applicable, for the year then ended in accordance, and this is the good part, accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. That basically means you get a grade A, and she should be commended for that. So I just wanted to share that with Council and Mayor Pro Tem.
Great, thank you.
We like her too.
Good. Council, do we have questions? I guess it was all pretty lucid then. Well, the business at hand then is to approve the audited financials. If there's no further discussion, I think we go ahead and entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the audited 2020 financials as presented.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Yes, thank you, Becca. Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
I'm not done yet.
Okay. This looked like, to me, it looked like a long and somewhat intimidating agenda this evening, but it's moving along pretty well. We've taken care of 6 that have been moved to 1, so we're now at Receiver Act on Council Correspondence.
No, there's another item, Mayor.
Wait a second.
H5.
I'm sorry. Okay. Change order policy, yeah, I'm sorry, what am I thinking? I'll blame it on jet lag. Okay. First reading of ordinance number 0921, an ordinance of the City of Manitou Springs, Colorado, amending Chapter 3.32 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning procurement procedures to add sections addressing change orders.
Mayor, may I introduce this real quick?
Yes, please.
Thank you. When I came on, there were no policy regarding change orders, and everybody could just make a change order as needed and move forward. Over the last year, Becca and I have been talking about it. That is not a best practice, nor is it transparent. So she reached out and checked with other agencies of how they do their change orders. I'm from where you have to at least present them if they go over a certain amount, but sometimes you can't wait 2 weeks, so then there's other policies. But this is really to tighten it up a little bit for construction projects and other projects as we move forward. As we all know, those of us that have worked on big projects, there are change orders. They're anticipated no matter what you do. I've done big projects and done 6 months of discovery period and still had change orders that happen with it. So this is really to tighten that up. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Becca.
Yes, thank you, Denise. So our current procurement code, while I think it's pretty comprehensive, like Denise says, does not address change orders. So she asked me to write a change order. So I researched it and read multiple change order policies. And from that, I wrote this ordinance, and then I gave it to our city attorney, Jeff Parker, to review, and he approved it and tweaked it a bit. But what is before you has had a lot of research behind it and is officially approved by the attorney. Now, this one, it follows, in terms of approvals, it follows our current procurement code. So that's why City Council can, of course, authorize any change order. The city administrator can approve singularly and in aggregate up to an amount equal to $50,000 or 20% of the original bid amount. Department heads can approve change orders up to between 20,000, can approve up to 20,000. And then we added in this provision that a contingency should be equal to 20%. Now, project managers normally add a contingency of somewhere between 10 and 20% of the cost of the project. Larger projects tip towards the lower end of the scale, and smaller projects, you tend to go more towards the higher end of the scale. And since Manitou's projects are comparatively small, when you look at large cities projects like Colorado Springs, I put in the 20% because I'm extremely conservative and like to make sure that we have the money for it. But City Council can change the ordinance language, and if you feel that 20% is maybe not necessary in all projects, that we could certainly look at something like saying equal to 10 to 20% of the project, depending on the size and its type. I just wanted to throw that in there since 20% is being very conservative. But other than that, the change order is just something that we've been missing, and we needed it, and now we're presenting that to City Council to get something into our procurement language. Are there any questions? Yes.
Is there a downside to the 20%? It sounds like a prudent idea, even though it may be overkill, like you said, in some projects. Is there any reason why? Are you suggesting that we should change the language different from what it's been presented?
Well, it's just I've been thinking about it, and maybe we should leave it a little more up to the project manager is what I'm thinking. The downside is it's raised the cost of every single project we do by up to 20%.
But that would be the matching funds portion. It wouldn't be added to the any portion that was funded. Yeah.
I think they would have to include
Would
it.
they have to include that too? And you think that might make it harder to get approved for some of these because they think that's too cushy?
Possibly, possibly. Like I said, I started second guessing myself.
So
That's what-
how would this be modified, the language would be modified to accommodate that concern?
Well, like I said, I've written some language here. So I was thinking, instead of saying, excuse me, let me get over to the change order.
Becca, could I just add to that? The 20% does allow us to make sure that we don't come in underfunded, which is the worst thing we can do. So it does provide that to say, yes, we're going to have it. And every project is going to have some change orders. I mean, you go in and you find, you rebuild a house or you change something. So it does allow us to make sure that we have a good, solid budget and we are not overspending. And it's nice to end the year with under budget than over budget. So it sets us up for that success. And it's really up to you as you move forward. But we have small projects. We don't have multi-billion-dollar projects, which most go at the 10% on those instead of the 20%.
So Denise, are you saying that I shouldn't be second guessing myself?
It's just something to consider, but those are the reasons why, and it's really up to council of how you want to move forward. But we are, I will tell you, and the auditor said this, Becca runs a pretty tight ship. And anything that is spent, she knows about, and she has a reason why and how. So it's really up to council how you want to move forward.
I've just given you an option.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Becca, so all of the change, that 20% should cover all the change orders, correct? That's the intent here.
That is the intent.
Okay. And do you have any thing to support in our city? Have we collected that kind of information to know if we, often go up to that 20%, or is this just so new that we just don't know?
Basically just don't know, except I would say the Williams Canyon project, that had a ton of change orders. That one, I would have to go back and if you're interested, I can go back and.
No, that's all right. A lot's
Okay.
changed since Williams Canyon.
Yeah.
So, and the whole city has tightened up their contracting and procurement.
This is true.
So much. So, okay. I wish you hadn't second guessed yourself because I was
I am
ready to
so
go with it.
sorry. I just start.
Denise?
Yeah, the reason why we put this in place is because really the project manager has just been able to do it. And I didn't know about it, nobody knew about it, just went through. And I said, we can't do that. So this is really that control mechanism in place. So Nancy, we don't have that history of what the change orders have been, and I apologize for that, but we don't
Yeah,
have
no,
it.
I'm thrilled with this policy. I think it's wonderful, and I think it'll really help us, tighten up, continue to tighten up our processes.
And here's a thought. If this does turn out to be problematic, we can always bring another ordinance forward to change it. Maybe we should just stick with what I've given you.
I think it sounds like a good starting point. Then you can always revise it if you find that 20% is problematic. So, yeah, I think it's good. Oh, make a motion. Move.
Well, we have another question here. Counselor Chandler?
Just had a quick question on the ordinance itself. I'm on page, this could be just my naivete here, but it would be on page 1 of 3 of the actual ordinance under B2. The last sentence, the city administrator may exceed the $50,000 amount or 10%. Should that be 20? Is that supposed to?
That should be 20.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure that, okay, just wanted to just make that clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, see, you can see I was debating between 10 and 20 and then went with 20 and then started thinking about it again. No, that should be 20. Thank you for pointing that
So if a motion's going to
out.
be made, I would just want that change to be made.
Good catch.
Yeah.
And the reason why that's in there is sometimes as you're doing a project, we can't wait for 2 weeks to get it moved, but it does say that I need to send you an email to keep you informed on this.
Okay. Well, with that then, would someone like to make a motion? Judith?
Sure.
Good.
I move that we approve ordinance number 0921, an ordinance of the City of Manitou Springs, Colorado, amending Chapter 3.32 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning procurement procedures and to add sections addressing change orders with one modification under B number 2 to change 10% to 20% in the last sentence.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded. Counselor Wolf, with enthusiasm by Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, any further discussion? If not, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Becca.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm looking carefully to make sure I don't overlook something again. All right. Okay, and now I believe we're at Receive or Act on Council correspondence. So, Council, who has something? Mr. Bremner?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on the cog noise. It stopped. And I thank Denise and Roy for meeting personally with Gary Pearson. And as I was driving down to Silverton last weekend for the Hard Rock 100-mile race, Gary Pearson gave me a phone call, and he expressed his apology for the cog noise, and he said that they've implemented procedures so they're not going to be working on the cog at night. And if people are working on the cog at night farther up the tracks, that they won't run trains up there to go pick up the personnel. They'll have to walk down if they're within the city quiet hours. So that's a very good positive thing. Today, for the first time, they ran 9 trains. At least that was on their schedule. And I kind of observed throughout the day to see what the traffic situation would be, and it looked like things were moving pretty smoothly. So looking at their schedule, starting in August, they're going to start running 11 trains a day. So every 40 minutes, all day long. So that's going to probably be some impact as far as traffic and cars and so on. So we'll have to see what happens with that and see how they manage that. That's all.
Good. Thanks, Steve. It's good to hear that. Counselor Wolf?
Yeah, I don't have the address, but I had a question. There's like a huge, it looks like a trailer sitting on the sidewalk, so you can't use the sidewalk. On the south side of Manitou Ave, in front of that building that has all those recent concrete blocks added to the wall. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Down here, kind of by Manitou Auto?
Well, it's definitely down here. I don't know if it's by Manitou. Yeah, maybe.
About
It's on the south side. It was a huge trailer on the sidewalk. I thought sidewalks were for walking, so I was surprised to see that would be allowed. So I would just ask that someone look into it. I mean, have we authorized someone to put a trailer on a sidewalk? Yeah, I thought it's not supposed to be there. So that's
Yeah,
all.
okay, yeah, I noticed that site that they've been doing
Did you see that?
construction there, and I saw, I think it was last week, a couple of pickup trucks had been parked up. They were close to the wall. They didn't look to me like they're obstructing the sidewalk, but I think that's probably the area you're talking about, so.
Yeah, and this trailer is on the sidewalk. It's not on the road. It's on the sidewalk, right in front of the wall. Yeah,
Okay.
that's all I have.
It sounds
Oh, and I
like-
appreciate the big COG signs coming down. Thank you for that.
Great, well, thanks to Denise and to Roy. And Denise, maybe you could have neighborhood services take a look at that trailer concern there, and get that looked at tomorrow. Okay. Anybody else? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thanks. I've got several things. One is that the structural engineer is scheduled to come in on this Wednesday, tomorrow, I guess, for the Hiawatha Gardens assessment. And hopefully then we'll have the written report in time for our August 10th update. And I don't know if you were going to address this, John, but we did meet with the school superintendent this morning and about the bond issue, and she's interested in coming to brief that to council, probably September, I think, October timeframe. So that will be interesting. And then I had talked with a couple of people about our meeting last week, our council meeting last week. And I suspect other people felt the same, but I left feeling very discouraged and frustrated, and obviously to the point of anger, and had to, deal with that. So as I think you all know, I deal best on teams, and sometimes on a team it gets very frustrating when other team members don't meet your expectations. But I think it's important that all members of the team not jump to the worst interpretation of of things that are spoken. I would also like to ask that if I say something that is offensive or inconsiderate, that my fellow team members will discuss it with me, and of course, most of you know that I will do the same for you, since I will call staff or my fellow council members if I'm challenged by something that's been said or done. Over the past few years, I've worked with a lot of members of the community, including staff, and I personally gauge our success as a team not on what we do wrong, but on how much we do right. And for me, that balance is very, very clear, that we do a heck of a lot right. So I want to share with all of you, council, staff, community members, how much I value and appreciate what we accomplish together. And with that, I'd like to announce that I have decided to run for council again. So whether that's good news or bad news, I don't know, but I've decided to do it. So there you have it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Announcements? Okay, I guess not. Let's go ahead and go to the city administrator's report.
Okay, I just have a couple. The outreach for the library building has been going very well, and so just want to let you know that they'll be taking it to HPC and Parab on August 9th and August 10th. So they continue to get comments and emails and other things, so that has been going great. So I just wanted to announce that. The Day of Friendship is coming up. Next week is a very busy day for things happening in the community that I just want to, the candidate forum, or not yet, is on August 2nd here. And Nancy, what time does that start? I don't know if I have.
6:30. Yeah.
6:30?
Yeah.
Okay.
So put on your calendars, and the agenda's not fleshed out completely yet, but it'll consist of Judy giving a lot of good information and some current, whoever is willing to be on to answer questions and so on about what it's like to be on council and so on. Thanks.
Great. And then we have a Day of Friendship on July 30th, and that will be over at the park. So it's celebrating, and I know the mayor has had some great ideas of how to really bring that together. So that will be on the 30th. And then on the 29th in the morning from 7 to 9 will be coffee with myself here in City Hall, whoever would like to join. And then that evening, there is meeting with the police over at Becker's at the trading post for that community. So they'll be meeting that evening there also. Then I just want to say something. This week is Employee Appreciation Week. And so I wanted to recognize the employees. And as part of Employee Appreciation Week, I would like to recognize all of the employees of the city of Manitou Springs. As a result of their hard work and dedication, we continue to move forward with great accomplishments. Last week, you heard many of them, and the list of their accomplishments are too long to mention everything that they've done. We have employees that have served the city for over 30 years and employees that have just started. As a team, they are amazing. You see employees picking up trash, saying hi to residents and visitors, and providing exceptional customer service. The employees work tirelessly serving the residents, and their hard work and dedication does not go unnoticed. Next Wednesday, July 28th, we will have an all-employee picnic, and the city facilities will be closed from 11 to 2, so staff can spend time together, and thanks to the entire staff for all that they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
I think that's it, and Roy's
Okay.
on vacation this week,
Okay.
enjoying.
Great, yeah. And you jogged my memory there. Just one comment about the Day of Friendliness. When this was brought up, it was fairly vague, but I think our thought was that about this time in the summer, kids are, especially grade school age kids, they're lonely. They haven't seen a lot of their friends since school got out. So the thought maybe was just to give them an opportunity to come down in the park and meet and play a little bit, see each other. And in cases where we've got kids who are new to the school district, this would be an opportunity for them to come and interact with some new people and maybe reduce some of the anxiety associated with being a new kid in the district. So this is really, and this would be an opportunity for adults to learn from kids to be friendly. So that's the thought. Okay, well, last item in business is adjournment. So if we have a motion,
I move to adjourn.
motion. Second, all in favor say aye. Aye. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all.